Michael McBride, host of Veritas Views, and the more we do these, I keep noticing things, which is a lot of these come back to this idea that adults can do hard things. They can handle pressure, they can make decisions, they can raise kids, run teams, keep a household moving forward. And then, sometimes you do something ordinary like put them in a mandatory HR training or drop a terminal diagnosis into the family system, or you add one more text thread that needs a response, and suddenly everybody is fried, reactive, or quietly checked out. So, what is that? Why do small, ordinary moments sometimes take more out of us than the big, obvious stressors? Today's episode is about the hidden workload, the mental and emotional labor that lives underneath everyday life, and how it changes how we show up. First, in Two Therapists Walk Into we walk into a mandatory HR training. Who's in the room? What are they thinking? Why people struggle to pull it together for a short time, and why the dull stuff sometimes still matters more than we want it to. We jump into an Am I the Asshole where a son in law is tired of hearing everyone tell a terminally ill father in law to take it easy until he gets better. It opens a hard conversation about realism, hope, denial, and why families sometimes can't fully hear the diagnosis, even when it's spoken clearly to them. And finally, You're Not Crazy But asks a question that feels weirdly modern, which is, why do text messages exhaust us sometimes? What is so draining about the smallest communication, and how do you protect your attention and your nervous system without becoming cold or unavailable? Three scenarios, one thread, the invisible demands that shape behavior, and what helps when your bandwidth is thinner than your calendar suggests. Let's do it.
Okay, Dan and Gail, I have a brand new segment. We've never done this before.
Ooh.
And I have not told you about it other to warn you that
No.
we'll see. So I'm calling this segment Two Therapists Walk Into a dot 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 dot. Um, where I'm going to drop you into a normal social situation and then see what you can tell us about what's happening under the surface. So are you game?
Of course.
We are game.
Always.
Okay, so here's the scenario. Imagine this: a mandatory HR training in a beige conference room with stale donuts and a slide deck from 2013. The topic: respectful communication in the workplace. Irony already thick enough to spread on toast. Employees file in, pretending not to dread the next 2 hours. The rule follower sits up front, taking meticulous notes. The checked out veteran slumps in the back, immune to corporate enthusiasm. Then we have the overcompensator who laughs too loudly at the facilitator's jokes, trying to look like the most compliant employee in the building. Meanwhile, the real problem employee scrolls on their phone, the exact behavior the session is supposed to address. There's always a devil's advocate who challenges every obvious ethical point, and the corporate gaslighter who declares we've never had communication issues while everyone else stares at the carpet. Everyone panics at the mention of small group activities. Adult humans revert to middle school coping strategies. It's chaos and business casual. So, what's actually happening in this room psychologically? Like, I don't know. I'm just curious to throw you guys in that room and what you see when you walk into that space.
So you're talking about each of these individuals and how they're reverting to their own defense mechanisms, shall we say, the place where they show up and they're the most comfortable by being the eager participator, the distancer, etc.
Well, I think like we are all adults in this
Yeah.
situation, right? And like I would like to hope that adults who have been in the business world know that like HR has to have these conversations at times and trainings are sometimes, important. And yet it feels like every time I've been in one of those spaces, virtually or otherwise, there's like there's so many different personalities and none of them seem to be able to like I don't know, grow up and be present for the thing. So I just was wondering,
Well,
like, why is that such a struggle for us?
okay, so full disclosure here, in those kinds of corporate training things, I'm the one scrolling through my phone in the back of the room because I find most of those corporate training things, I understand that they're required, but when I was last at the big company, and if HR is listening, well, okay. Like I absolutely, it's like, how do you fast forward through this training that's required of you quickly enough to get to the end of it so you can take the quiz and move on. because I took this quiz every year and I took this training every year for the last 12 years. And it just, I feel like I'm wasting my time. Now, maybe that's cynical. It is cynical. I would love for all trainings to be meaningful and for all corporations to sit back and say, what do my employees need? A company is telling me I have to take a CPR training. I worked at the time 100% from home. I have no one to do CPR on. I am not seeing any patients in person, and it's corporate policy. So, rant over. I don't know if I'm even answering your question, Michael. But I have I will admit upfront to a very negative impression of most corporate required trainings.
I think you got at what I was thinking, which is essentially each of these personalities in some way, shape, or form is saying, this doesn't apply to me. This doesn't feel meaningful. Even the quote unquote person, the offender, who, has engaged in problematic communication in this hypothetical scenario, their leadership has not done a good enough job or communicated clearly enough, like, we have a problem with your communication. Instead, they have chosen and run around this and be more obtuse and more vague and pull everyone in. And so this person, I mean, is not so vain, doesn't understand that this song is about them. And sorry. So, I think in this case, if we have one problematic individual, we owe that person a very clear sit down with management to say, this is exactly the concern we have. These are exactly the behaviors we need to see changed, or these are the benchmarks. Clarity in that communication is respectful and I think and meaningful. And if that person can't meet the benchmarks, then you need to be taking HR actions, because what in the scenario as described, Michael, you have one individual who is problematic. And so this company is coming in and mandating a session, a 2-hour session, and I can't remember how many individuals, but even if we say that there are 4 individuals in the room, you now have 8 hours of corporate time being spent on something. So this is not a good use of corporate time and dollars, and it certainly isn't going to boost morale because it doesn't feel meaningful and relevant to the other individuals in the room. So I think this is the problem, right?
Yeah.
Now, as Dan said, if we can make that training meaningful, can we make it interesting? Can we make it can we create an environment where our employees feel supported and empowered? Then you have buy-in and people go, oh, that was really interesting. I learned something. Unfortunately, I don't think that is the status quo. I think more often we just need to check a box because we have some compliance or regulatory box we have to check. And so there, we've done it.
And I've had trainings within a corporate setting that were phenomenal. I've had trainings that really taught me something that I okay, this is, but the same way that I take trainings as a psychologist, Gal and I you and I are both required to do a certain amount of continuing education. All continuing education, all training should have at its core something meaningful, something important to convey. And they should be done in a way that is interesting and connects the employee. Because this, just like teaching, you can teach a class in college or any other level that conveys all the information in a way that no one will understand it, or will care or will capture it, and you've checked the box of teaching it. Or you can teach it in a way that really captures people and really is meaningful to them.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to look at here.
So I'm wondering then, thinking about how this applies to professional conferences, because you mentioned that, right? I think every professional conference I've gone to has similar roles that people seem to play, right? There's the one person who asks questions that are not questions, that are often just reiterations of what the person has said. And, I don't know, I was just struck by, I guess, the dynamics at play in that it's kind of a public space. It's kind of performance. Some people are there to learn, others feel mandated. So I don't know. I was just, I don't know if there's more to say about that.
I think you're right, though. If you have a room of 50 to 100 people attending a professional conference, your descriptions of those individuals, like, absolutely, we could pick those people out in the room and they exist in every room, almost without fail. And I can admit to being probably in some of all of those roles, depending
Hmm.
on the training, right? I can
Oh
be the
yeah.
phone scroller and sit there and, pick away at a game on my phone. I have been the, upfront, this is really interesting. I'm engaged. I've been the challenger. I think it depends on the
Hmm.
presenter. And again, if they are making me feel like they're bringing me along with their content and their material, or are they talking down to me? Are they trying to tell me something in a way that feels like I am sort of maybe being chastised or not valued in that room? So I think there are lots of reasons that those dynamics show up, and I think there's also just interpersonal ones. I
Hmm.
might walk in that room feeling extremely defensive, and so I'm just armored up and ready for the battle because I am telling myself a story that I don't need this. And so, I think there's speaker dynamics, and I think there's listener dynamics.
Hmm. 100%. That makes sense.
One of my very first professional conferences that I ever did was in graduate school. And I don't know if you remember this or not, Gail, but there was, we were a panel all talking about Don Quixote, women in Don Quixote. And we intentionally paired off with two people pro con basically in a situation. And I got to argue the pro part, and then my partner argued the con part. And there was this person I could see in the audience, like that was just like uncomfortable in their seat and like radiating energy. And as soon as it got to Q&A, they jumped up and they're like, I think you're wrong. And like they started like berating the person who was with me. And it was on some level fascinating that we moved this person to such agitation. But I also was like, this isn't how you behave in this situation. And I had never been at any of those professional conferences up to that point either. So, but
I
that's
only have a
that.
vague memory of it. Sorry. Apparently, it was really impactful given that person's level of agitation.
Well, whether trainings or HR or professional conferences, I appreciate the additional insights and helping me unpack that scenario.
Dan, I think you and I have both talked with people who think, gosh, if my loved one just worked harder at snapping out of the depression, they'd be fine. They'd be better.
Yeah. And that's really not fair to tell someone who is depressed and really not feeling like they have the energy to move forward. I mean, depression really saps you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this isn't about being lazy. Your
No.
brain is shutting down and shutting out and cannot see the energy and the hope.
Yeah. And when people get stuck there, they feel in the moment like there isn't an easy way out. Like and when their family members or other people in their lives might be telling them like just pull your and they're not I mean they're not wrong in that we can treat depression through behavioral activation and getting stuff done. However, that depressed person, it often just feels like they're being told what to do by someone who's not really understanding where they are.
Right. If you are just feeling piled on and can't find your way out, think about just giving a shout out to us at veritaspp.com and see if we can help you.
Thanks for joining us again. This segment is our longest reoccurring segment, Am I the Asshole? Where I've gone out on the internet and I found a scenario that I'm going to throw to Dan and Gail and see what they have to say about it. I have gone through and I've de-identified the post some so that it's a little more discreet, but you guys ready for the topic of the day?
Of course.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is
Should
what
we
we've
weigh
got.
in and jump the gun already?
Yeah,
We're
it's good.
fond of
Not the
judging.
asshole.
We're
I
getting
love
so
it.
good at this, we don't even need the
We
details.
don't even need the scenario, not the asshole.
I don't know,
All right,
Dan.
the
Totally
topic is, am I the asshole for breaking the news that my father-in-law is not ever going to be cancer-free again?
details, please.
Maybe we need more, but maybe and
You
maybe
were
not.
so confident just a moment ago.
Well, I hadn't heard the scenario yet, so
Books and covers, don't judge them.
ignorance is bliss. I didn't even get the we didn't even get the cover. We didn't like we walked.
We didn't. We like walked in the bookstore. That was
Yeah,
it.
that was it. That was it.
All right, this is what I got. My father-in-law was diagnosed about a year ago with a chronic cancer that is treatable but not curable. The plan is basically cycles, chemo, and immune therapy. Try stopping chemo to see if immune therapy can hold, then restart with different protocols when it stops working. The keywords are when. He understands that this is his life now, but the rest of the family keeps talking as if the cancer will be over soon, and they keep telling him to rest until he's cancer free before he gardens, sees friends, or does normal life things. He has told me those comments hurt because they imply he should put his entire life on pause forever. Lately, he cries when people say it, and even after they leave the room and it comes up again. When the family acted confused about why he was so sensitive, I finally said it out loud. This is chronic. It's not going away, and talking about when it's over is basically asking him to stop living. They acted like they had never heard that, even though they were present for the doctor's explanation and had been along for the ride. I'm getting heat for being blunt and an asshole, but I'm wondering, am I?
No.
Here's the thing. We hear what we hear is a combination of what we hear and what our brains are able and willing to process in the moment. And I say willing as if it's a choice, but it's not always a choice. Family wasn't able to hear dad's going to die. That this is not treatable, this is not curable, that he's going to have cancer the rest of his life and then he's going to die. And they were not able to hear that. And it's hurtful. I've talked to people, I mean, I'm sure too, like that, everyone they're like, would you stop telling me to fucking keep fighting? Like, I just need to fall apart a little bit here. And like, sometimes I need to be told to keep fighting and be strong and all that. And sometimes I need to just be held and cry. And we need to be paying more attention to what that person needs rather than what we need in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really well said. I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes we hear what we are able to hear or what we kind of want to hear. And I think we want to hear that our loved one is going to be cancer and they're going to be the one. And I think, to maybe put a little bit of a wrinkle in this, I mean, there are some cancers that will exist forever and are not an immediate death sentence, right? And I think we have become very afraid of the word cancer as if it means the same thing, and it really doesn't. Cancers are not created equal. Treatments are not created equal. And so what does this mean if your loved one has let's say a blood cancer that they could live a very long time with on these regimens of chemotherapy and I forget what you said, Michael, and it's okay, other, immunotherapies and that kind of thing. And, maybe this person has 15 or 20 years. That's a really different cancer diagnosis than someone who has stage 4 pancreatic cancer and has a matter of months. And how does that person then choose to live the rest of their life? And it is a life, right? And the choices that they make within that for their own health care, including gardening and visiting with family, even if, what we would wish, even with a fairly short lifespan, is that you would take it easy and lengthen that. We're not talking about what is dad's quality of life here.
No.
And so, this person was, I just think, brave enough to come back to the touch point of like, we need to orient ourselves around this fact and we need to grieve this right now so that we can better support dad. I don't think he's an asshole. I'm going to just jump in with my.
I don't think anyone's necessarily an asshole unless maybe some of the heat that they've given OP for saying something, but none of us are getting
out of grief too.
Right. But none of us are getting out of this alive.
Life is a terminal condition.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It's this wonderful moment where I had a biopsy and a doctor at our clinic, Gail knows the story, called me up and she said, yeah, it's benign. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm not going to die. And she's like, oh, no, you're going to die. You're absolutely going to die. But only in that we all are and not from this. And I thought that was just a wonderfully grounding moment that I've never forgotten as an act of kindness in a sense, because like this is the reality of our lives. We all have a finite existence, and perhaps this person, theirs is more defined by an illness, and an illness that in all likelihood is going to take their life sooner than it would have ordinarily. It is up to the family to process and deal with that, and to be there for the person in their life and to be able to hear it. And it may be hard for them to hear. because we're always like keep fighting, and we should do what we can. Also, like you got to live whatever life you got in the best way you can.
I totally agree. And I think it's just a really enormous thing to wrap your head around, either as family or as an individual, to know what your cause of death is going to be. Often there's that theoretical question, if you knew how you were going to die or when, would you want to know that? And some people know that. And I mean, I think that is a really enormous piece of information to sit with. And I think it's why it makes it kind of an interesting conversation point. Would you want to know? Would you not want to know? And then if you did, what would you do with that? And that's what this guy is being faced with. And I think, maybe this is not a surprise, but I really am going to come down on the side of dignity and death. And that gives a lot of choice to the individual that is living that particular diagnosis or journey. So
yeah. I mean, unfortunate for this person going through that, and but at the same time, hopefully their family will recognize the value in accepting the reality here and acting in a more supportive manner. We think we're supporting by telling people to keep fighting. We think we're supporting by telling people you're going to beat this thing. Yeah. We think that's supportive, but it may also be intensely invalidating of that person's experience. You're telling me to keep fighting and I'm going to beat this thing when I have terminal cancer that's absolutely 100% going to kill me. And that's incredibly invalidating for people. And that not what they need in that moment for many people.
As you say this, actually, I think the really selfless thing that OP has done here is speak up on behalf of dad here and say the difficult thing, because if dad were to say it, then I think he gets that same invalidating message, right? Don't give up, keep fighting. And so he is in a really difficult position. So the OP steps in and does maybe what dad is not able to do, that he doesn't have that footing in the conversation, which is to say, no, my doctor said this will be terminal and at some stage or level here.
Right.
So I'm staying with not the asshole. I don't think the family's the asshole either. However, they need to check their grief a little and ideally have the conversation with OP and come back and make some repair in the family here. We're going through something and this is tearing at us.
I agree wholeheartedly. No one's an asshole here. And feelings are intense around these kinds of things, and it's super hard to. This question comes up a lot, like the feedback. If someone comes to my office as a therapist, and I get referrals from cancer centers, sometimes they're like, "I'm like, why are you here?" And I was referred by the cancer center. I've got stage 4, whatever. And my response is in nearly every case is, "Oh shit, I really fucking hate cancer," and it's really interesting because people like almost to a person, and that's not my response every time, because I try to modulate what's most appropriate, but the response I get from my clients in that situation is often some version of, "Thank you for not telling me to keep fighting. Thank you for just acknowledging how awful this is, because I really appreciate that, because everyone's afraid of acknowledging that this is terrible." And I just really, and it opens up the conversation because it meets the person where they are. Again, if the person is in that place, and they're not always there, but
but they signal that to us very often, right? And I've had this diagnosis and I'm going to keep fighting and my faith has kept me strong. And they signal where they're at. And that's our job, to meet them there. But very often, you're right. The answer is just, oh, shit.
Yeah, that's I hate, oh my God, that fucking sucks.
Yeah.
And people sometimes need that. So no one's an asshole here. And everyone needs to take a breath and think about what's best for the person I love who has cancer, and what's best for me is a way of coping with this, and not to let those things interfere with each other.
Any guesses on what the internet said?
Oh, they shit piled on.
Oh yeah, the family.
On OP.
No, I think they piled on the family. I think they said OP was a good guy and family were a bunch of dicks, and we're not no assholes here.
I'm typically wrong in my prediction, but I'm going to stand by it.
Okay, Michael.
I do a terrible job of predicting the internet.
Are either one of us right, or are we both wrong, both out of line? The internet more insightful than we expected. And
They actually had a very similar conversation to what you both had, which is, I mean, really that the OP is not the asshole here. The
I'm glad
next
to be wrong.
most populist group was there are no assholes here because they
okay,
acknowledged that everybody's going through something and it's difficult, and you
we
don't you struggle with that.
yeah.
There were a few people who said that he was the asshole, but that was in the very, very rare minority. And they're both like, you need to be tread more cautiously, be kinder, be gentler, kind of blah blah blah, right? Um, so I don't
Yeah,
So
know.
we've
both
tried gentle. I think we're past gentle. We
yeah.
need a big old frying pan upside the head because you're
It
not
sounds
able to hear it.
it sounds like Gail, you and I both owe the internet an apology for underestimating their ability to think things through. So I want to the entirety of the internet, or at least those people on the internet who responded to this question, I offer my sincere apology for underestimating your thoughtfulness. So
I am just going to thank the internet for being critically thoughtful and coming through for OP and supporting this individual in their time of questioning and need.
excellent.
Love it. Yeah, when I went through kind of the different responses we got, I mean, they really did touch on a lot of the same things you did. Like, your
Wonderful.
logical brain heard one thing, your emotional brain deleted it. There were different approaches about how you could have brought this up in a kinder way. There were conversations about how potentially the OP spoke on behalf of the father, not being able to say this thing or not being able to be heard in that moment. A couple of people
Mhm.
kind of talked about the perspective of the outlaw, right? Because he's talking about this
Mhm.
as his father-in-law.
Mm.
And so being removed from the family core, bloodline, whatever, maybe gave him a different
Distance.
perspective
I
and
forgot
distance
that he
that
was
was
an
able to
in-law.
do that,
Oh,
which is kind of
gave
nice.
him, yeah, it gave him some emotional distance to be able to do it. But we can, it's amazing how much we can psych ourselves out. I often talk about, like, I was so convinced that I failed the licensing exam for psychologists that when I psyched myself into believing, and this is back in the day when it was like 8 weeks before you got your letter. And I got the letter and I read it and I went, okay, I'll have to figure out how to retake it. And like some part of my brain couldn't figure out why the letter said that I failed, but also said congratulations. So then I went back and reread it and I'm like, oh, I think it says that I passed. And then I had to reread it again. And I'm like, oh, I did
Oh,
really well. Like I got a really good score. But I was so convinced that I failed it that my first reading, despite it starting out with the word congratulations,
congratulations.
exclamation point, I read, I failed and have to retake it. And it just, we are, our brains are not nearly so accurate in their perceptions as we think they're going to be.
Yeah.
And so I totally feel for this family and everyone involved. And I'm glad that OP had the distance to be able to say this. And hopefully they'll do some good reparative work and be there for dad or dad-in-law as he struggles with this and gets to live whatever he gets to live in the best way he can.
Yeah. Yeah.
The side conversations that amused me the most, which I'll just share because I can't help but do that. One was there was one person who promoted some unverified cannabis oil as a cure, and the internet pounced all over them, which was delightful. There was a number of people talked about the stages of grief, and then there were
Mm-hmm.
people who were like, the 5 stages of grief is like, way out of date. Like, really, you need to refer to these kind of stages of grief. And they kind of unpacked the different models of grieving, and that was kind of
I would
interesting.
actually submit that they need to go back and look at their research and understand what the 5 stages of grief were really intended to do, because those people are probably not actually familiar with the Kubler-Ross model and what it was intended. And look up David Kessler, not Dan Kessler, David Kessler.
Yeah.
This the
Carried on
smarter
the
Kessler.
carried
Oh,
on the work, and he's got
great,
new research and new work coming out
wonderful,
and teaches in grief
wonderful.
and loss. So anyway, that's an aside.
And then the last one was the cancer, and I didn't say this, it was a lung cancer. And somebody
Mhm.
warned about gardening risk infection related to MAC lung disease for
That's fair.
immunocompromised people.
Okay.
And so it was like these little side conversations were like supportive and wonderful, and also like sometimes way off base. So,
Mm-hmm.
but
Okay, excellent.
anyway, thanks again for talking through a
Mm-hmm.
scenario like this with me. I always enjoy to see what you pick apart, and sometimes where the internet overlaps with you as well. So,
Right.
um, we'll tune in next week for a whole nother Am I an Asshole debate.
Hey, Dan, you
Yeah.
know, we both work with individuals who have OCD, and it's been my experience that they really feel like maybe their brain is the problem, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
come in, and when they talk to us, I think one of the first things I want to help them understand is what their brain has done is created a way to adapt to fear and uncertainty.
And one of the problems, and they took this out. I think they took the diagnostic criteria. Not pointing to the diagnostic manuals behind me. They took this out. But for me, one salient feature of OCD for just about everyone is they say, doc, this is going to sound really crazy, but, and as soon as they say that, I have a good idea that what's going to come next is something related to obsessions, compulsions, something like that. And that's because they make you feel like they're like you're like, and they use this word, not me. They'll say, I feel like I'm crazy. So they recognize that there is something there that isn't right, but it's hard to overcome it. And so they're
Right.
often fearful of bringing it forward.
Absolutely. These are intrusive, they're all-consuming rituals, thoughts
Mhm.
that really make it hard to live a full life in a way that you might see your friends and family live. So if you are struggling with symptoms like this, you certainly can reach out to us at veritaspp.com to learn a little bit more about what kinds of treatments are available for you.
Yeah. And OCD is treatable. People often feel like they've not been able to overcome it myself. I know that this isn't like I know I'm doing something that doesn't make logical sense, and I'm not able to overcome it. And it sometimes feels insurmountable, but it's not. Reach out. We can help you.
This next segment is one of my favorites. And we've done one or two of these before, but I don't know. I love this. So it's called You're Not Crazy, But. And the idea is simple. We all have habits, reactions, or inner monologues that we quietly, worry means something is wrong with us.
We're not so quietly.
Eh, Correct. And, maybe in this case, I'm asking for a friend. But anyway, we take one of those moments, put it on the table, not to diagnose it, but to normalize, contextualize, and hopefully understand what's going on underneath. So I have a scenario for you too, if you're up for it.
Absolutely. Bring it on.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So this is what it says. Lately, I've noticed something weird about myself. I get drained by messaging. If someone texts me, I'll see it and immediately panic about what to say. Sometimes I put off responding for days because I'm worried they'll think I don't care, or I'll say the wrong thing. I even caught myself staring at my inbox, choosing between 5 different responses, like it's a high stakes negotiation. It's exhausting. I work 40 hours a week. I like people. I just dread the act of messaging. When I finally reply, I'm relieved, but then I replay our exchange afterwards like it was a job interview. My partner says I should treat text just like normal conversations, but it doesn't feel that simple. Why do normal messages feel so psychologically heavy? Is this social anxiety, avoidance, a consequence of always being on and reachable, or am I just spoiled by modern communication?
All of the above.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't think it's the messaging that's exhausting this person. It's their anxiety, and I'm sure it's showing up in other places, not just
Yeah.
text messaging.
Yeah.
This feels like the somewhat more modern or updated equivalent, Dan, and I'm sure you've had these folks in your office over time that say, I don't mind communicating in any form as long as I don't have to make a phone call. Phone calls are
Mhm.
draining, they're anxiety producing. And that's been probably the most common um, iteration that I've seen in my office. This just feels like the updated version of that because, of course, what we say in text messaging then is there for the review in the record in the way a phone call isn't. So I kind of get where maybe that social anxiety, perfectionism, high performance is kind of coming in for this individual and kind of swamping them in their ability to communicate
Yeah.
in a more easy breezy kind of way.
And there's a reality of text messaging in that if and I forget, Gail, you probably remember the statistic. Some massive percentage of our communication is not so much the words, but the tone, inflection, like 80, 90%, I don't know, but
Yeah.
tone,
I would have said
tone,
80% of.
inflection,
Mhm.
and the other sort of meta part of it that we can't natively include in a text message. Now, we have this wonderfully inventive way of doing it where we add in emojis or other things to tell people what the emotion of it is. But still, this is open for interpretation because an emoji to me may not mean the same thing, especially cross generationally.
Yeah,
Um,
no, absolutely. I think a great example of that is the hands that have been interpreted as praying
mhm,
versus clapping versus high-fiving,
mhm.
which are three very different things all rolled into that single emoji.
Yeah, and I heard a younger person tell me it was like 2 years ago now, so it might no longer be valid, that the thumbs up emoji is sometimes indicating sarcasm, or a
Oh,
period
sure.
at the end of a sentence indicates that you're angry
Yeah.
or annoyed. I'm not. I'm just old and use
Yeah.
punctuation.
Yeah.
So, like there, it could be some of that, but I think this is just. I agree with you, Gail. I think this is that the person has anxiety, and the anxiety just has attached itself to this text messaging, which does have a pressure behind it. There's an expectation when I receive a text message that I'm going to respond rapidly. Um,
Yes, and I think this has to do with our being a social species and not being able to adapt our social constructs as quickly as our world around us is changing. And I
right.
tell people all the time, the reason you worry about these interactions is because people matter. And you might say people exhaust me, but that's just the very thing. That's the paradox of it.
Yeah.
People and relationships matter and our social structure matters, and that's why you're worrying about this at a very deep and core level. We still need these groups, and we still need to feel connected and a part of things, and we're really terrified that something we will do will exclude us from that belonging.
Right. Right. So, the short answer there is their anxiety makes sense, but it's likely not the text messaging is the place where it is manifesting, but that's not the problem. I don't think. The
Yes.
problem is anxiety, and we want to address the anxiety. Text messages is the thing.
Right, exactly. It's the expression of, and we would do some
Yeah.
really good work around the anxiety and help them unpack why in this particular format, maybe even
Hmm.
come up with some solutions to kind of give themselves permission to limit this. This seems to be leaking all over the place. And so often therapeutically, we would give them a little bit of what I often call guardrails,
Hmm.
so that you can feel a little bit more held by it and not let it just spill out into the rest of your free time.
Yeah, and we'd be going down like what probably I don't know for sure, but in all likelihood, this person's having all sorts of like negative automatic thoughts that are
Yes.
cropping up around the text messaging, and we want to look at it like, are these thoughts realistic? Are they accurate or inaccurate? In what way are they inaccurate? How do we create more accurate thinking around these negative thoughts so that they may not be. I mean, some of them might be accurate, in which case, okay, we'll accept them, but some of them may be inaccurate, and we want to give that person the opportunity to push back on those inaccurate thoughts. Yeah, good cognitive therapy 101 kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, one of the things that people online responded to this was they said, things you can do are turn off your notifications, turn off your read receipts, turn off some of those things. I'm curious, like, I don't know, are those, I don't know, I struggle with that, right? Like, I don't know that that fixes the problem. It just delays it maybe, or
It
I don't know. What are your thoughts on those kind of interventions technology wise?
it depends. I would say it really depends on whether this is a boundary. Like I sometimes mute group chats that I'm in. Like I just need to not be bothered by this and not think about it because it's going to disrupt my day. So I'm going to mute this for 8 hours, and there's a setting to mute for 8 hours, and then I don't have to look at that or think about it. And that's a kind of a protective boundary. On the other hand, like if it freaks me out and I'm having intense anxiety, then it might be avoidance, and avoidance makes anxiety worse, not better in the long run. So I guess it depends on why you're muting them. That's my thinking on it. Gail, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I often will start with what's the intention here? Is the
Hmm.
intention to protect some time and space, create a moment? Like, what is that? Or is it simply to delay this inevitable and then you're going to sit wrapped up in it, and it's still going to cause you harm rather than setting that limit that then actually is um, the opposite of causing harm, right? Doing you a benefit or being helpful. And so looking at that, deconstructing that a little bit. And they might say, well, it helps me right now because it relieves my anxiety. Yes, but when you turn it back on, can you show up? Can you engage? And if the answer is no, I want to mute it for another 8 hours, then it is avoidance. And avoidance can be a coping strategy in the short term, but as you said, it makes anxiety worse in the long run.
Yeah.
So the other thought I'm thinking about, just kind of thinking, you guys talking about boundaries and like how you define those. I know when I am trying to be creative and if I'm writing, one of the things that really helps me is to kind of compartmentalize the parts of my day. So like I'm going to write for this chunk of time and that's all I'm going to do. And I'm going to set the phone aside. I'm not going to worry about it. And then calendar time for those kind of responses. Um, but I guess I'm also kind of wondering like, if you have, I've never communicated that to like family or friends or whatever. Like, hey, don't bother me between 7 and 9 a.m. because I'm going to be doing a creative thing. I don't want to be distracted
Hmm.
or whatever. I'm wondering what, do you have a language that you might recommend to like tell somebody? Because if you have a loved one and they're the one who's causing the problem, maybe not even a work thing, what does that conversation look like? Because I feel like you should probably name the problem because maybe telling them that it's causing you
I
anxiety might help as well, or I don't know.
no,
Okay.
no,
It
I
depends on what you're protecting. In this particular instance, I agree with Dan. I don't think it's particularly helpful to name, hey, text messaging really causes me anxiety. I'm going to delay my responses to you by 24 hours. I don't think that's helpful. I think there are other things that we might do or interact socially with that we would want to protect. Makes totally good sense to protect and we might name,
mhm.
but not in relationship to the problem that you just brought up.
It's okay to not respond immediately. Like we don't have to respond immediately, and we all know like, oh yeah, so and so usually responds within minutes. So and so often waits. I was actually waiting for a message back from someone yesterday, and I'm like, oh yeah, this person almost always seems to take like a day. I don't. There's nothing wrong with not responding immediately to every message that comes through to us. A message is a request for a response, but the answer can be like at least in our heads, like yeah, not right now, and I don't think we're obligated to respond immediately to any outreach unless it is noted to be emergent, in which case you should respond with, I can't handle this right now, but whatever.
I love that. A text message is a request for a response. It makes me remember, and I think I've told the story before in high school when my high school psychology teacher talked about the phone ringing as an invitation to answer the phone.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
just an invitation. And
Right.
as a teenager, I was like, what do you mean? It's a demand, right? And I
Oh,
think like I said, I think I've told that story before, but that's what it reminded me of is just checking our thinking around what does that ding of your phone mean? Does it
yeah.
mean, is it a demand? Is that how your body is experiencing it? Is that how your brain tells you, or what that story gets filled in as from your brain? Or is
Right.
this a request or an invitation, a reach out? And then in that case, you actually have choice and you have agency.
Hmm. Hmm. And that's fine to say that
Hmm.
the answer can be, I'll get to it later, and it
Hmm.
doesn't have to be a conversation around it. It can be, a non-response again within reason, because there is some expectation of responding.
Yeah.
But that ex- but there, I think it's not the expectation that we often think it is. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. I'll be sure to pass that on to my friend. And if he or she requires additional
your
assistance,
friend, your
they
friend
know where to
Michael.
find you. I mean, Michael's a very common name, so, maybe.
Fair enough.
So, what tied this episode together? It's the difference between time and bandwidth. In the HR training segment, the issue is not intelligence or motivation, it's attention. People are showing up with the brain full of open tabs, and the room is asking them to care on command. The gap creates boredom, irritability, and disengagement, even when the topic matters. In the Am I the Asshole story, the invisible workload is emotional. A terminal diagnosis is not just information, it's grief, fear, bargaining, and the longing for a different outcome. When people keep saying, until he gets better, sometimes they're not lying to anyone on purpose. They're trying to survive what they know. And in You're Not Crazy But, texting fatigue comes from constant low-grade decision-making. What do I say? How fast do I respond? What tone did they mean? What do they think I meant? Tiny messages on demand, a surprising amount of interpretation and emotional management. If you want one takeaway you can use this week, try this question before you react. Is this actually a problem, or is this a bandwidth moment? That one check can turn blame into clarity and clarity into a better next step. I'm Michael, Veritas Views. Thanks for spending time with us. Check us out next week, and of course, like, follow, and share.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gail McBride at Dr. G. McBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, well, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners. Credits: Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing this show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael McBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. McBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. If you believe you may be experiencing a mental health issue, please seek the assistance of a qualified mental health professional. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 from anywhere in the U.S. to be connected to Crisis Mental Health Services.